Hello guys, it's Chaucer. Today we're doing another Beyblade discussion on the V2 remake bays. So we recently got all of the remake bays for, well, the V2 bays in the anniversary set. Of course we did have a few of them before, but they were, or at least some of them were, of course, like tuned up a bit, parts were changed. And of course we got the initial release of Drasil V2. I honestly don't think these were very good, and I want to talk about that, but before I get into that, Trigger V2 is the one thing here that was done well. I don't want to discredit all of these bays. So I want to say, I feel like a lot of the reasons why I don't like these is because of how good they did Trigger V2. Just want to mention that now. And yeah, so I'll be comparing to that a lot, and also Dragoon V2 is not that bad either, but the other two, Drahanzer V2 and Drasil V2, I have opinions on. So first up, I'll talk about the drivers, since this is probably the least offensive part of the video. So looking at their drivers, we have, for Dragoon, Explosion Dash, Drahanzer, Reboot Dash, Trigger, Wedge Dash, and Drasil Planet Dash. I'm honestly fine with all of the driver choices here. Nothing really stands out as being too bad. There is, I guess, one good thing and one bad thing about all these drivers. The bad thing is that Explosion Dash and Planet Dash were only released in this set. Of course, Dragoon V2's initial release had Exceed Dash, which was then changed. So yeah, Explosion Dash is only in the set, Planet Dash is also only in the set. That's not good. I feel like you should not be locking parts in an anniversary set unless it's like directly related to the anniversary like parts, like the Drasil V2 layer. That's fine, honestly. But Explosion Dash and Planet Dash, don't lock them in here. I don't like that. I guess it's not directly the fault of the V2 bays, so that's not like a huge negative or anything. Just bad planning. The other thing is good though. All of these are dash drivers. For whatever reason, before the V2 set, the only Bakuten Shoot remake bay to have a dash driver was Gaia Dragoon. The original one, not Gaia Dragoon V. Really could have used Iron Dash, and if they did that, it would have been in, 2020? So maybe we could have gotten like an Iron Dash reprint somewhere down the line. And then also, Dragoon V having Evolution, and Tronzer V having Dimension. Dash drivers existed for both of these drivers. I have no idea why they weren't dash in the set. It's an absolute anomaly that they weren't, but they're not, so yeah, that was a bit of a problem. But in this set, all of the drivers are dash, even for Trigger and Drasil, which is nice. Now, before I get to the discs, I actually have to talk about the layers first, and what I think they did wrong here. So as far as the actual, layer designs go, in terms of how they modeled them, they did fine. I don't see any problems with these, the 4 layers when you look at them kind of from this viewpoint of just kind of a top-down view. Nothing's wrong. But Trigger V2 did something very special. They modeled the SP parts to kind of utilize a special layer system. There's kind of the grooves on the layer for these SP parts right here to attach into. This makes the bay feel way more dynamic and interesting, and it was a really good move, and really was the only way they could make these SP parts work. But they had a chance to do that for the other 3. Would it have been a perfect solution? No. I get that some SP parts really wouldn't work perfectly like that, in my opinion. I understand that, but here's the thing. What's better, having the SP parts as an actual specialized, dedicated piece to go onto the bay, or just throwing them in as a reference, like on these two, on the frames, and on this guy, on the driver? To me, I would much rather have a specialized piece going between the layer and disc. Even if there's some inaccuracies with the placement of them, having that piece to me would have been way, way better than what they did here. Also, connecting to the disc. Having this kind of connects to the current system. when these were released. You know, the DB system, of course, spanning through DB and BU when all of these were released. Having those SP parts kind of makes a pseudo high and low mode thing. When they're not attached, you can use any disc on them. There's a gap with the DB discs. But when it's attached, you can only use DB discs, sort of, you know, emulating low mode. This not only gives them, in my opinion, better SP part representation to how they were originally, having, you know, dedicated pieces, but also functions with the actual current system. I don't necessarily think the job of the remake bays are to be exact clones. They should be very close and, you know, made clearly after, you know, the original bay, but at that point just re-release them if you're going to make them perfect. So I think the job should be to make them very close to the original while trying to adapt them into a modern system. Again, with the current system when these released being the DB system, having the SP parts sort of used kind of for that DB disc integration, like how they did with Illegal here. Of course, you know, has a gap without this, but with it on, looks flush and good. Again, creates that pseudo low mode. That would be perfect for the system. And to me, perfectly would integrate these bays into a modern burst system while pretty accurately retaining the original V2 bay ideas. But they didn't. They only did it for Trigger V2. And the disc choices were not great for the others. I think the only possible one is on Dragoon. If you're not going to do a DB disc, wheel's probably the next best thing. And they also painted it black, which works very well for Dragoon V2. So I will give them some credit there. Dron's V2 has Zero Cross. These parts were released in 2017. This bay was released in 2021, and then they re-released it again with no changes in 2023. Drasil V2 has 10 turn. These are 2018 parts. Released on a 2023 bay. The only parts that should be being re-released when they're that old are drivers, since drivers were way more consistent. Discs that old should not be getting re-releases in 2023. Just saying. Not only were these bad choices in my opinion, but again, you could have easily gave all 4 of these bays DB discs, having the SP parts integrated onto the layer. It would have just worked so much better, and it would have given the V2 bays a much more unique system. Look at the Metal Fight Explosion bays. They have their own unique system. Of course, with the kind of clear wheel face bolt piece, you know, being its own thing, and then also kind of the metal wheel piece. There's 2 pieces, you can interchange them or have mode changes for certain ones. That's cool. These could have had something like that with the SP part idea, but they did not. Only Trigger V2 has it, which is, again, easily the best bay of the V2 bays, but not only those. In my opinion, Trigger V2 is the best remake in general for both Bakuten Shoot and Metal Fight. They completely just ruin the chances of these 3 being all that good, because again, they didn't do the SP parts correctly at all in my opinion. They could have had the TV disc integration like very, very well done. Like they could have done a great job with it, but they just chose not to. And that's why I just don't think these V2 bays are very good, aside from Trigger V2. I guess Dragoon V2 is okay, but these 2 are not, in my opinion. That said, there is one counter-argument to what I've been saying, which is that you could argue these 2 bays were released in 2021. This bay being released in 2022, and then this was released in 2023. So these 2 were actually released before Trigger V2, meaning that the SP part idea, in terms of how they made this, was not there yet. You could definitely make that argument to where, okay, these 2 were developed first, so maybe that idea didn't come yet, and they just wanted to leave it to this. Probably should have done it for Drasil V2. I feel like the Fintectors, I think that's what they're called, pretty sure. Having those as SP parts would have been way more interesting than 10 turn. Just saying. So, they should have done it there, they didn't. These 2 you can make an argument for, but at the same time, do you really think that they made the V2 base without any plans? Do you think they just made Dragoon V2 and Dronzer V2 without considering Trigger V2 and Drasil V2? I highly doubt that. I'd assume they at least had some kind of idea that they were going to make a special layer for Trigger V2 even if they didn't have the ideas yet, why not withhold them? I feel like they were just really lazy here, and it's funny because they really could have probably done the other ones without much effort. Again, you already had the kind of idea of the grooves on the layer, with the SP parts, kind of with the idea of how they would connect. Why not replicate that for the other three? Even if they didn't do it for the first two, because maybe they just really did not have that idea there. Why not modify the layers to include that, while also then including, you know, the new SP parts for these two bays, and then just doing that with the Drasil V2 from the start? You could argue then, oh, well, they have to change up the bays too much for the anniversary set, but they changed the sticker sheets for, like, you know, Dragoon V2, for sure, with, like, the driver change and stuff, but, also, they changed parts. Again, they painted the disc, they changed the drivers, the new driver variant. And then for Trigger, they changed the disc, and they also gave Illegal its own color variant. This is a unique color to this Illegal disc. So they clearly put effort into kind of redoing these two bays. So why do they not try to at least add those grooves onto these two? I almost think that would have been not that big of a challenge. So while, yes, there is an argument to why maybe they didn't do it, I feel like they still easily could have done something with these bays, but again, they just chose not to. And in my opinion, the V2 Bay remakes, because of that, have suffered and are really not a great line overall, because again, they just didn't do what they did with Trigger, which again, by far the best remake that they've ever made. It's such a dynamic bay. These three just didn't get that treatment. Dragoon, again, it's okay, but yeah, these two just aren't. And yeah, that's kind of the problems with the V2 bays. Again, they really should have made them with DB discs, with the SP parts, kind of done like Trigger. They had a perfect template right here, and they fumbled the bag. That's the easiest way to say it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the V2 bays, which are also technically the final releases of Burst. I mean, Drasil V2 is actually the final release of Burst, realistically, so yeah, and they just did not do them justice at all. Really would have liked to see SP parts done properly. Again, even if it's not perfect to what the original system was, adapting it into Burst, utilizing the current, system with DB, was the smartest thing to do, and they succeeded here, but nowhere else. I think I've reiterated that enough. So anyway, that's all for this video. So, yeah. Let me know what you think about these bays. If you have any opinions on them, do you agree or disagree with what I had to say? I am curious about that, because I don't know if I've heard many people talk about the V2 bays very much, so at least the Burst remakes of them. But anyway, that's all for this video, so thanks for watching, and bye-bye.